Hey everybody, Mr. Eric here. Got a quick comparison for you today. Two devices that I've used quite a bit. So this has kind of been a long time coming. I do really like both of these devices. It is the ES100 Bluetooth DAC amp and the Fiio BTR5 Bluetooth DAC amp. So you can see them here. Again, they're very, very comparable in their use case and their function and their power. So the big question is like, how different are they in sound, and is there one that you should pick over the other? So I'll just tell you my experience with it, and yeah, let's dig in. So let's take a close look at both of the units here first, because I think we can see some significant differences here. So the ES100, this is the MK1 version. So there's an MK2 version that looks very, very similar. I think they just did some tweaks on like how the buttons work. So I'm not 100% sure on that, but not a lot changed. It's very easy to mistake them for each other though, because I thought I bought the MK2 when I bought this one, but it was the MK1. So just double check that if you're purchasing used or wherever you're purchasing, just double check on which version it is, because you probably want the MK2, unless you're getting a heck of a deal, which they're out there on these. Like you can see these or buy these used for maybe like 40, 50 bucks pretty consistently. So an easy, cheap device to pick up to add Bluetooth to some headphones. So, you know, what you're getting here though is a plastic build. It is very compact. What can I give? Here's an SD card. This ought to give you a good reference for size of how big this thing is. So not very big at all. One thing that I do like about this is it's just got, you know, a little clip built in. You don't need an extra case for that. It's got 3.5 out on single-ended on one side, and then it's got 2.5 balanced on the other. And I'll have to look at the specs here real quick, but on both of these devices, the balance is significantly more powerful than the single-ended. You can see on this side, you got play, pause, and you got, you know, back and forth as far as that goes. This is a micro USB charging device, and for this guy, there's no real display, but when you turn it on, you do get like a series of flashes here of different colors, just telling you what is going on with the device. And that's pretty much all there is to this one. It feels very cheap. So this is not a premium feeling device. It feels very cheap. And but that being said, I have used and abused this thing for like a year, and it's still ticking, and it's doing just fine. So take that for what it will. Let's take a look at the BTR5. This is a much more premium feeling device. However, you are going to pay for it, because this guy, I bought this one used for about $85, but you know, they retail for about $105. So they don't go on sale very often. So it's much easier to get a good deal on the ES100. You can see this thing is covered in like glass, and it just feels good. Okay, it feels good in the hand. Now you can see mine's kind of nicked up and stuff, so it maybe doesn't wear well over time, but it sure looks good and feels good to the touch too. Setup is a little bit different on this one. You got both outputs on top, again 3.5 single-ended, 2.5 balanced, and then all the buttons are on one side with this one. So you've got volume rocker, kind of like play, pause, and power, and then the volume rocker also serves as forward and backward, but it's kind of opposite. So if you want to go forward, you kind of do a long press on the negative volume button, and if you want to go backward, you do a long press on the top, which is admittedly a little strange, but you get used to it. You can see size comparison. This one's bigger. It's almost, well, not quite twice the size of the ES100, but it's noticeably bigger, and that does impact use, I would say. Because like this guy, so the ES100, you know, I can clip it like on my shirt collar like this. I mean, it's maybe a little weird on this shirt, but it's super light. It clips just about anywhere. You can't really do that with the BTR5. So it has an external clip that you put on it, and then, you know, you got a clip that does add quite a bit of bulk to it. I usually just leave mine on, to be honest, because I like to just clip mine in my pocket or whatever. But with this guy, I wouldn't clip it like up in a situation like this, right? That's gonna be super awkward. So it does alter the use a little bit. The other thing that I really liked about the size of the ES100 is that it fits well into like lots of IEM cases. So for instance, here's the Fiio Legacies, and you can just tick it right in there. Boom, no problem. You know, with the BTR5, like maybe you can make it work, but not, you know, you got to do a little more shuffling, things like that. So just, it's important to know with these devices that like size does matter, and having a nice lightweight design, it doesn't feel as nice, but there's some function to that like plasticky lightweight feel. Now, as far as interacting with the devices, I much prefer interacting with the BTR5, but again, I like the ES100 for just its portability and things like that. So why do I like interacting with the BTR5 as much? Well, for one, it's got like a little bit of a display on it here, so you can see, you know, what kind of codec you're using, and you can, you know, see volume level and just basic things like that. But really what it comes down to is the buttons all being on one side, because I can squeeze it well to push those buttons. Whereas on this guy, because there's buttons on both sides and it's so small, like I go to change the volume and I accidentally change the track. And I make those little mistakes on this all the time. So again, it's not necessarily good or bad, this being small and plasticky. There's just some pros and cons to it, you know, that you need to know going into it. And same thing with the BTR5, you know, it feels nicer, it's got more heft, it's nicer to interact with, but again, there's some downsides to that too. And you know what? I think I would almost base my purchase of this based on those interactions. The sound is different. For me personally, I mean, it does kind of come down to pairing, but I thought that the ES100, keep in mind, these are slight differences, okay? So keep that in mind. But you know, when we're talking about sound differences and sound characteristics here, the ES100 is a little more forward, it's a little more compressed, and I felt like the BTR5 was a little more spacious. I felt like it was a little more dynamic, a little more laid back in its presentation. So for me, for most headphones, I prefer the BTR5, but there were some instances where I like the ES100's presentation better. One headphone that comes to mind is the AKG 7XX. I really like that paired with this little guy here. But you know, like I said, I almost think like form factor is more of a deciding choice here. And then two, if you like to EQ, because if you like to EQ, then this guy is your choice. The ES100 has a very robust app. The EQ works wonderfully. There's all sorts of different options you can do in there. And it is just, the app works extremely well. So if you like to EQ and fiddle around with that stuff, like the ES100 is probably your choice. If you don't EQ a lot like me, and you just want like a nice device to interact with that you can use like on the couch or in bed or something like that, that for me is the BTR5. So for me, out of these two, like I'm keeping the BTR5, and I'm giving the ES100 away to somebody, just because it's that cheap that I feel like I can do that, and feel pretty good about giving somebody a nice little gift there. So I think that's gonna wrap it up here. I know no definitive answers when it comes to these two devices, but they are both really nice devices. I haven't had an issue with either one. I think, you know, look for a good deal on either one, and you probably be pretty happy with your use case. balance does make a difference, right? The power output, well, let me just look that up real quick here for you. Okay, so output specs, BTR5 is single-ended. Oh, let me see if I can do it like this. Maybe I'll try to get fancy with this here, okay? So single-ended is 80 watts at 32 ohms. Balanced is 220 milliwatts at 32 ohms, okay? So that's this guy. For the ES100 on the, whoops. Okay, took some digging, but I did find it. Okay, so the single-ended is 75 milliwatts. That's at 16 ohms. And the 2.5 balanced is at 302 milliwatts at 16 ohms. Okay, so for all intensive purposes, they're pretty close to the same is what I would say as far as power output goes. Oh, one last thing that I should mention if you're trying to make a decision is if you're an LDAC person. So if you're an Android user and you're an LDAC person, then it's gotta be the BTR5. The ES100 does not do LDAC. So that might be the last thing that you should consider when you're deciding which one of these to get. But yeah, I endorse them both. I think they're both excellent products. They've served me both well over the past year. I just like the BTR5 just a little bit better, mainly just because I like the way it feels and I like the way it sounds, and I don't EQ and I don't need LDAC. So the BTR5 is the one for me. But I think you'd be happy with either of them if you're just looking to give one a shot, and I would just try to find a good deal on one or the other. So that's gonna do it. Any other questions about these two, feel free to drop them in down below there, and while you're down there, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button if you're interested in more headphone and headphone related stuff. And I will be coming out with more of those videos here in the near future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.